Today, I won't consider this man as Dale or Mr. Beecham, but for me, today's a day just to label him as I always have, Paps. I truly thank you all for being here today. I really do. Now, on behalf of the family or my cousins or even Paps, I thank you personally for being here. He was literally my best friend, and he saw all of you at such a high regard. I will say that I do not plan on my comments being too lengthy today, but on the same token, in conversations with him, he always told all of the ministers to be short and sweet and told the grandkids to take all the time in the world. I do not want today to be about me or about my cousins or aunts and uncles or my parents or even Nanny. I don't even think he'd want it to be about him. He'd want me to share to you the one that made him who he was. I haven't always been Brother Dale, y'all. The good Lord has brought me through a lot. He said that all the time. In his younger days, he lived in a life of alcohol, tobacco usage, and partying, and he was always ashamed of that when he talked to me about it. I'll never forget riding down the road with him the day he told me about his past. We both cried, and I honestly don't even know why. He talked of his absolute love for Lexington and his time in Chicago and then back here in Dyersburg. He moved those times looking for a new beginning, a fresh start, a do-over. And I felt that. He always talked of the night where he was here in Findlay at a revival after moving back here from Chicago. He was sitting in the back of the church, and the minister of the night said, "Dale, why don't you come up here to the altar? You know you want to." And Papa always told me that his response was, "And that's all it took." He grabbed his cigarettes and everything else in his pockets and literally laid them on the altar. Since that day, he never touched it all again. Our little fun times and rides with Jerry Clower and ball games for the church with him nagging us would have never been the same had it not been that night at the altar. That man you all knew wouldn't have been the same man had it not been for that night at the altar. He was a man of character because of that altar. When I was younger and, even up to the time at the end where I spent with him and Nanny for lunch, at the age of 9, one summer he took me to the drive-thru of Burger King. I'll never forget it. The lady was rude and I could tell, but he never said a foul word about her. At my age, I'd been working at school on counting money, so I got the change he was given, and I began counting. By the time I had completed my count, we had been driving for about 5 minutes or so, and we were nearly home when I began laughing. He said, "That's not the funny part of the story, Colin. Why are you laughing?" Obviously, I was referring to the Jerry Clower joke on the radio. I said, "No, Papa, that woman was mean, so she gave us an extra penny of change." He said, "She gave us a penny too much?" I said, "Yes, sir, she did, but it's okay. It's just a penny." He then turned the truck around and drove all the way back. He went back through the drive-thru and said, "Hun, you accidentally gave us too much. Have a good day." And he gave her back her penny. That's a principle that this man showed me through a Burger King drive-thru. That doesn't just happen once, but it's a lifestyle that I feel confident he displayed to each one of you here. Today I'll close with one final story about what this man means to me. I'm not a Beecham. I'm a Streeter. Paps only had daughters, so he wasn't able to pass on that family last name like some people get to. Having that said, my other grandfather, Frank Streeter, or as we call him, Daddy Frank, I never got to meet. He actually passed away a few years before I was even born. He had 2 sons, and luckily I'm able to continue his last name in my family today. There aren't many Streeters around here. I don't know if you know that, but there aren't. Actually, I think we're the only ones in Dyersburg. Little do most know, though, that it was intended that way. You see, my great-grandfather Streeter was one of those drinker, smoker, womanizer guys. He did some unthinkable things to both himself and to his family. My grandfather, Frank, as a young man, saw the legacy and principles that were being passed on to him by his dad, and he didn't like them at all. So he just decided to move. He didn't care where, just out of there. You see, the Streeter last name had a ring to it in his community, but it wasn't a good, clean ring. It was one that you kind of cringed when you heard it, simply because of what his father was as a man. So his job had a transfer opportunity to Dyersburg, where he literally picked up everything he had and moved his family to. This church and this community where we are today is where he landed. I never met him and never got to pick his brain on exactly why the change of location, or get to ask him, like, well, if you wanted to get away from a reputation or principles, then what reputation and principles did you want to begin? I never got to ask that, and he never physically told me that answer. To this day, when I go to an interview, a business setting or a chat or anything like that, when I introduce myself, without fail, the introduction goes like this. I say, hey, my name's Colin Streeter, and I shake their hands, and whoever I'm speaking to say, Streeter? I haven't heard that name, and in my mind I think, thanks, Daddy Frank. That's exactly why you came here, to start over, to start fresh. And then they'll say, are you new to town? And my response is, no, I've lived here pretty much my entire life. But do you know Dale Beecham? And without fail, the response is, oh, yeah, I love Dale Beecham. He's one of the best painters I know, and he's a great, humble Christian family man. And I'll say, yeah, I'm his grandson. Today, I stand here thankful for this the most, that the principles that one grandfather, whom I never met, moved over his entire life and family for, were instilled in me by this grandfather, Papa, who was willing to give up a lifestyle for at an altar. Because of his dedication to his community, his church, and his family, my Streeter last name has a different ring to it. I love you, old man. I love you, Paps.